Hey, and welcome to the video version of our Atlanta Voiceover Studio podcast. And in this episode, it's with voiceover vet Anne Ganguzza. Heidi's going to highlight her storied career in a sec, but they cover everything from the evolution of e-learning, where most e-learning opportunities are these days, misconceptions people have about e-learning, what makes a great e-learning talent, how Anne thinks AI will impact e-learning, the standard for e-learning demos, and a whole lot more. So without further ado, let's hop right in with Heidi and Anne.
I regretfully feel like this should have happened a long time ago with our podcast, because the person that we're having on the podcast today is someone that she has a podcast that we refer others to, and I just can't believe that it's taken us this long to have Anne Ganguzza on the Atlanta Voiceover Studio and Pro Voiceover Training podcast. But Anne, if you've been in the VO industry at any time, she is a leader in the industry, and she has been for almost 2 decades. She is an award-winning demo producer, coach, talent. She also hosts, like I said before, she hosts the VO Boss podcast, and she also leads a monthly group called VO Peeps. So Anne, we're so happy to have you. I'm so glad it finally ended up happening
Me
to
too.
be on the podcast.
Oh, me too. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to be here.
We already talked a little bit about potentially making a part 2 of this podcast, because there is so much that we could really talk to you about. So, but for the part 1, we want to touch on e-learning because you are the queen of that.
Well, thank you.
But before we dive in, can you give us an overview of how you got started in voiceover and got to where you are today?
Sure. Actually, well, I was working for a school, and prior to that, I was in medical, and I was in orthopedics, and I was a design engineer for an orthopedic firm. But after that, for a good portion of time, for a little over 20 years, I was working for an educational institution, and I was on staff as a technical person and was certified to teach as well. And I had like what I felt to be the absolute best of both worlds, because I didn't have to go to all the teacher meetings, and yet I got to teach some of the time, and I also got to play around with technology the rest of the time. And I absolutely loved it. It was like it was honestly the best. And I worked at a school system that had a nice budget to invest in technology. And so back in the late 90s, we were one of the first installations of voice over IP and voice over IP phone systems. And so that was something that we did for other area schools as well as nonprofit organizations. And, we really did a large install base all around the state of New Jersey. And I was the project manager for that. And at the end of an install of phone systems, I would say, okay, you're all set. You got 300 phones. You just need to record your welcome greeting and your menu tree. And of course, nobody wanted to do it. And so I got elected to do it most of the time, and it was just one of those things. And I was like, well, okay, I'll just sound like the best, operator ever. And I had so much fun because I used to have to actually get on the phone and record it. It wasn't where you could upload an MP3 because, I'm old. But it was one of those things you had to pick up the phone and record live into it. Yeah. And I did it for like thousands of phone systems. And ultimately people said, wow, you sound so professional. You should do that, on the side. And so I looked into it, and it was like a thing. And so I started studying voiceover and did my due diligence, and, got a coach and studied for a while and got some demos and really started doing voiceover on the side and actually fell in love with it. And believe it or not, today I still do. I do something telephony every single day. I'm on like a bunch of rosters, and I just love doing telephone systems in such a crazy, weird, geeky way. But I also love e-learning because I taught for, now, my gosh, I was just thinking about how long have I been teaching in my lifetime? It's over 35 years. I mean, it's like incredible. And so it's something that I truly, truly love. And it's something that it was like a very natural fit to go to also want to do e-learning as a voice actor, as well as, all the fun tech stuff. And so I love to teach, and I love doing e-learning because it allows me to teach.
Sure,
behind the mic.
Of course. That's what it is. How has e-learning changed since you started almost 20 years ago?
In voiceover or e-learning?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to say e-learning and voiceover. And so I think that e-learning over the years has gotten a bad rap because a lot of times people, if they ever took an online learning course, they'd say, oh, God, it was so boring because they had to sit in front of a computer and listen. Yeah. And it's one of those things where it's hard because when you're in front of a classroom and or I'm like in front of you, we have each other to look at. So we've got not only what we hear, but also what we see. And we've got that energy that, is just kind of complements each other. But yet in online learning, you basically are just the voice. And then you have maybe something that you see in front of you on a video screen, which is not as, I think, as engaging by default. So what has to happen, I think, for anybody that's doing e-learning now, I mean, they have to be very engaging. And for many, many years, we all thought we just needed to be articulate and clear and professional sounding. And so what that translated to was, I always do this. Welcome to module 1. There became like the really robotic, clear, articulate, let's just read very well because we can, right? And the people that hired us, right, they were like, oh, you've got a great voice. She's very clear, very arts. It's very important. People need to be able to hear you and understand you. Everything's accurate. Thank you so much. Here's your money. And on our way we would go. The thing is that the people that hired us never took our classes. And what happens when you're just reading, it just becomes super boring and super robotic. And so that, I think, over the years, it's been necessary to kind of, let's challenge that perception that e-learning is boring. And I blame the narrators. I blame the people that hired us and didn't take our classes to say, God, that's boring. You have a great voice, but boy, it's super boring.
Yeah.
So you need to be that teacher. You need to speak to the person. You don't need to read to the person. So over the years, I have always strove to teach my students that they need to be great teachers behind the mic. They need to talk to the people that are listening to them and not read to them.
Is it the same thing that, like, with commercials too, instead of trying to talk to a room full of people, that you're just talking to one person? Is that the same thing for e-learning?
I think so, because in reality, even if you're standing up in front of a room and you're teaching a classroom of students, at any one given time, you are looking at one person. Like, it's not, you know what I mean? You can be looking at a group of people, but you're speaking to one person at a time. Yeah. And if you've ever been in a classroom where the instructor is reading the PowerPoint to you, like, we know that that's like the most incredibly boring thing that could ever happen. But in reality, we're looking at one person at any given time. If you're a good teacher, because as a teacher, you want to make sure that people are getting what you're saying, like they're understanding it, like the light bulb is going off, there's somebody home, they're not sleeping or texting or, on fire or anything like that. So constantly, as a good teacher, you're looking around that room and you're focusing and making sure that people are engaged with you and that they're understanding the delivery and getting the lesson that you're teaching to them. And so really, I think no matter what you're doing, you have to always talk to a person and not talk to a group. Because when you talk to a group, it starts to sound like a speech. And a speech is very much like all about the speech and not about the person. And I think for engaging voiceover and engaging someone typically when we talk to people and we talk with one another, we want to be engaging, right? We want to be interesting. And we don't listen unless there's something in it for us, or like there's something interesting about it, or it's entertaining, or it captures our interest in some way. And so you as the speaker and behind the microphone, you have to do the same thing, no matter what the script is, whether it's commercial or it's e-learning or it's corporate. And sometimes it's a whole lot harder with, let's say, the longer format because you've got to keep their attention for a longer period of time.
Yeah. you've got to be interested that whole time too, right?
Well, yeah,
you can't just zone out.
Yeah, you have to be. Well, yeah, and if you're just reading it, that really lends itself to you zoning out and going into autopilot. You have to really understand. And I'm not saying you need to take the course, but to be a good teacher, you kind of have to know what it is you're going to teach. You have to know what your purpose is, and you have to know, like, the objectives of the lesson are. And typically, when you make a lesson as a teacher, you have goals and you have things that you want to teach, and you need to put them in an understandable, comprehensible format. And ultimately, behind the mic, you've got to represent that, right? And how can you just read behind the mic because from left to right because you don't know what that lesson is yet? You have to really kind of understand what is the most important thing that I'm saying, and what is the lesson that needs to kind of reach the ears of the listener. It's not every single word is not important, right? There's only certain words that are important, and those are the ones that kind of you become their audio cliff notes. See, the cliff notes, I used to buy the cliff notes all the time. Yeah. That was that's almost like the summary if you think about it.
Yes, totally.
So.
Yeah. It's so true. Today, where are most e-learning opportunities?
Well, that's a good question. It's like the question of the day. Where do I get work in voiceover? I mean, there's, I think, first of all, I separate or categorize e-learning into two different categories. One is academic e-learning, and that would be, something like a lesson from an educational institution, like in like a subject area, like sciences or math or that sort of thing. And your audience is typically going to be, like a grade school or high school or college even. And then there's corporate training. And so that's a whole nother, what I consider that a whole nother category, because as wonderful and as noble and as beautiful as academic e-learning is, school systems barely have the money to pay their teachers what they deserve, let alone a voice actor. Here, let me give Anne Ganguzza, $30,000 to voice this curriculum. It's hard. It's really hard for educational institutions. So there is, I'm not saying there isn't work for that, but there's a whole lot more work for corporate because there's a whole lot more companies out here than there are, academic institutions. I say this over and over again. And last time I checked, there was 30.4 million registered companies with the SBA. And that's a lot of opportunities. Every one of them every company has a product or a service that they need to inform people about or train people on, or they have employees in their company that they need to train to do their job better. So there's just a lot of opportunities for corporate training.
Yeah. And most of that you can find through self-marketing. Is that how
I agree.
You suggest to most?
I love self-marketing because you have more of a negotiation platform for that, because if you are going for instructional designers and developers, right, they're their own business, and a lot of them are freelance, and they hire voice actors, and they're looking for a good price. They're the ones who will say, how much per word are you going to charge? Yes. If I talk to a company, I can just say, how long is the module, and I can price it based on that, and they aren't as, let's say, used to pricing things out per word. I personally think if you're going to price something out per word, you're nickel and diming me. Right? If you're going to be that concerned about, 2 words, increasing your price by so many cents, that to me is like, it's, that mindset is not where I feel is a good mindset, because I'm going to give you an excellent, an excellent audio file of instruction, and I should get paid accordingly. Not necessarily like, you had 102 words, so therefore, or, don't overcharge me. Right. So for me, I've always liked to go for companies, because companies have budgets, and companies aren't always thinking in terms of like how much per word, because sometimes, they don't necessarily hire constantly voice actors for instructional materials. They're just like, oh, I've got a training module that I need to get out to my employees, and you're a voice actor, so what would you charge me? And that to me is a whole lot easier to quote out, oh, well, that's like an hour-long module. It's going to cost you, like $1,200. And they're like, okay, great. When can I have it by? As opposed to, let's say, maybe instructional designers or developers who, again, this is coming out of their budget, right? And so they want to be cost effective. So, you become like the low man on the totem pole. But I'm not saying that you can't get work that way. There's many people that get work that way, and they get a decent price per word. I tend to like, going the corporate route because it is huge. The market is huge. There's a lot more companies out there that need training versus instructional developers. Just law of statistics, right?
Right.
Or,
Yeah.
30.4 million versus how many instructional designers are out there.
Right.
So
definitely less than that.
Yeah, right?
For sure.
Yeah. So it just makes sense to go for the companies, right? That to me, that makes marketing sense.
Of course. What do you feel like is the biggest misconception that voice actors have about e-learning?
That it's easy. That it's easy and you need to be clear and articulate and professional. Honestly, it really depends. I mean, yes, if you're teaching English maybe or as a second language, or you're teaching young children, you have to be clear and articulate and very, the cat will play or something, that kind of thing. And so I feel like there you're going to be more like reading because the actual way that you say the words is important. And so people just tend to think that all e-learning is just reading clearly and articulately. And really that's the biggest misconception. You've got to be everyone's favorite teacher behind the mic. That's the way I feel. And I also feel that there are people who are just used to having e-learning sound like that, and so therefore that's what they expect, and that's what that's why they'll pay for that. And so I'm not saying you won't get paid for sounding clear and articulate, but I'm saying that you can really elevate your teacher status by really thinking about you're a teacher behind the mic and who is listening, and you have to care and be passionate about it, because like for me, I had teachers in my lifetime that changed my life. I mean, I want to be that for somebody behind the mic. I want to motivate and inspire and change a life behind the mic. I don't want to just deliver information.
Yeah. So do you think that is what makes a great e-learning voice talent, is somebody that can be a really good teacher?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And somebody who has a heart of a teacher, like a service heart. Like it's about your student. It's not about how good you sound talking to your student. It's about your student and how you're making it easy for them to understand the material, and the fact that you care about them learning something, and that you're passionate about that, and you're passionate about the material that you're talking about, because that helps to learn. That helps people to learn when you're inspiring and you're passionate. I mean, I would ask you, Heidi, who was your favorite teacher and why?
Miss Barnes.
Okay, and why?
In elementary school. Because she pushed me and she believed in me. She saw something in me that no one else did. And she would say, Heidi, she was the first person that got me up to act and was like, you're good. Get up there, So yeah.
Yeah, and you can feel that from behind the mic. If you can feel if somebody cares about you, you could hear it in her voice. Of course, you could see it as well, probably. But I think a lot of that is translated through your voice. I mean, I think if anybody said to me, like when you talk to me, I'm pretty darn passionate about e-learning. I don't think there's any negotiation about that. I think it's fairly obvious that I love it, and anybody that loves what they do, it's very obvious. And so I think that needs to come through from behind the mic, and that's that top layer, right? That makes you unique. It makes you different than everybody else that's just going to read the material clearly and articulately. And the thing of it is, if you want to like leverage yourself as a competitive person and be like, okay, I can be a great narrator, but why don't I want to be the most amazing narrator that I can be, or the most amazing teacher that I can be? that people, for whatever reason, they're like, gosh, I don't know what it is about her, but I love the way she, she does this e-learning module, and I must have her again and again and again. And, to be hired again and again and get those repeat clients, to me, is wonderful. And for people to just say, there's something about it, but I can listen to her forever. She just really, she gets it. And people, I don't want people to, take an e-learning module with my voice and be bored. I want to be the best teacher that I can be. And I just, I care. And I think that last layer, if you're so busy reading from left to right, you don't have time to figure out where's that point of view coming from, because you're reading and you're reading, and I'm fast and I'm accurate and I'm reading clearly and professionally. But what happens when you do that, right? You have no time to think about, how should I feel about it? Where's my heart in this? What is it that's going to make me sound different than everybody else that just reads? So
yeah, I love it. I know that you have talked on other podcasts and YouTube channels about this. What's your view on AI and how it will impact the e-learning industry?
So AI, again, because we sounded like robots for so many years, right? That's the conception that, e-learning is going to be the first to go. But here's the deal. There's different buyers. And I think about it in the same terms of, there's different teachers, right? There's teachers that changed your life, right? And you don't ever forget them. And then there's teachers like, I had a college professor who, he was tenured, and he really didn't care if you showed up to his class or not. And it was like, hey, here's the material. Here's the test. You pass it, you fail, you fail. I don't really care. And those are the people, right, that say that, I don't care how it's delivered, right? They're going to get the information because they got to check the box. They got to take the class, and therefore they're going to hire, let's say, a narrator that simply narrates clearly and articulately. But then you'll also have those buyers that are like, oh, God, I really just want my employees to get the most out of this training, and I want them to enjoy it and not complain about it. Or I want my students to really get something out of this. And that's going to be the buyer that's going to hire you, the human. And, if somebody wants to hire AI and AI, to do a module, fine, that's fine. Have both. Why not have both? As long as you're protected, right? You want to hire a human in, that's the amazing teacher that can really motivate and inspire. Or do you want to hire, what if it's something that's simple and maybe it's just vocabulary definitions, or, it's English, teaching English and it needs to be clear and articulate, and you don't necessarily have to have a human being behind it. And, offer maybe another, right? Offer another voice for that. Yeah. And as long as you're protected, right, and you're getting compensated fairly for it, then I don't see a problem. Yeah. I honestly, we've got amazing groups out there that are fighting for legislation. NAVA, of course, is amazing. I did, that series on voice and AI like 2.5 years ago. I'm still talking to AI companies, and I think that AI companies have a responsibility to be good ones, have a responsibility to be fair, ethical, transparent. And I don't think that society will allow them to be anything but. You'll always have bad actors. In the corporate world, a bad actor is a bad company, or a company that'll steal your voice and do, make you say things that you didn't agree to. And so, but that happens in every industry. It happens, outside of AI, it happens with everything. And so we just need to be protected and have a legislation that will protect us, and do the very best that we can to be educated and smart about it. It's here to stay. You're not going to stop AI from happening. But no. I personally think that AI is going through this. AI has a lot of advantages, but I don't know if synthetic voice is one of the big things that AI will do to change the world. I think that AI changing the world will be with data, with data collaboration and data collection and interpreting data, not necessarily about the voice or the creative artistic parts of it, but the parts of it that will allow us to do our jobs more efficiently. And that's where I think that AI is going to grow the fastest and the most. I think the synthetic voice thing, I know for a fact that there are certain companies that have come and gone that I've interviewed are no longer there because they couldn't make a living doing the synthetic voice part of it. The bigger companies that are out there have kind of gone by the wayside where they're now either adopting fair and transparent things because society's not going to let them not. You know what I mean? And so I really believe that as we go through this AI evolution, it's going to find its way into where it really sits well and works well for the world and society at large. Synthetic voices, you know, I agree that I think that synthetic voices for people who don't have a voice already, synthetic voices for content that can't possibly be created with the human voice, like, you know, in a certain amount of time. There's a ton of content out there that never gets produced simply because, you know, audio for, you know, accessibility reasons and for disabled and, you know, that kind of thing. So either give them a voice or to allow them to have access to materials that they wouldn't have access to prior to to AI.
So true. Okay. So last question for you, and it's about demos. Because you know some demos, e-learning demos. What's a standard for e-learning demos today?
Oh, goodness. I mean, I love e-learning demos that showcase a variety of styles, real world styles, not just, you know, academic like science lessons, or because the world has multiple styles of e-learning out there. There's, you know, there's your typical you know, kind of slide delivered based online material. There's, you know, there's dialogue scenarios. There's all kinds of e-learning that takes place, and interactive e-learning with, like, let's say 3D virtual worlds. So I think a demo that really showcases a wide range of styles, plus a wide range of, I'm going to say a wide range from the performance from the actor, but in a way that actually showcases the fact that you're a teacher. You know, it's not so much, I get a lot of students who say, oh, I want to hear a lot of range in the demo, but what they're looking for is like different sounds. And it's not about the sound. I think it's about range as an actor. And remember, with e-learning, your primary goal is to be a teacher, right? And a teacher's never really going to be angry or sad unless they're playing a character, right, in a dialogue spot that educates somebody about something. So it's not so much about like, oh, I can talk really high or I can talk really low. It's more about how are you teaching the lesson and bringing the motivation and the inspiration to the student. How are you elevating the teaching moments, and how are you showcasing that in a demo, right, with a wide variety of different styles and that are currently being hired today. I mean, it's not just about like the objectives of this lesson are, you know, there's many, many more styles that have come out and that work. It's not even necessarily about e-learning styles. It's really about who's behind the teaching. I mean, honestly, it's about how you connect. It's about how you connect. So that demo has to showcase your connection with the student and showcase that you care about them and that you care about them learning the material.
Yeah. Well, if you are interested in having a demo done with Anne or coaching with Anne, we will put those links in the show notes so you can go there. Anne, thank you so much for joining us for the podcast. If we have a little bit of time, I want to try and get in a part 2. So if you're listening to this, then come back for part 2. We're going to talk a little bit more in depth about stuff besides e-learning. So thank you so much, Anne. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Atlanta Voiceover Studio and ProVoiceOverTraining.com are here to equip, elevate, and inspire you in your voiceover journey, giving you the tools and resources you need to create the voiceover career you want. Remember, you're building a voiceover business. Think outside the box. Cheers to your success.